What are we going to celebrate? Are we going to celebrate that it took until 1959 before we could vote in this country? Are we going to celebrate that it took until 1968 that we could vote in Quebec? What are we going to celebrate? Are we going to celebrate the fact that our Aboriginal languages are not considered important enough in this country to be regarded in any legal way? Are we going to celebrate the fact that there's not a single court in this country where if the only language you speak is an indigenous language, you don't have any legal rights there? But you will be forced to operate in French and English? What are we going to celebrate? I don't like what has happened over the last 500 years, 125 years. I couldn't do a lot about it. Let's say the majority of the people in this room, in this country, couldn't do anything about it. But what are we going to do about the next 500 years? What are we going to do about the next 10 years? So that when the year 2000 comes around, there are some differences. What are we going to do about the poverty amongst Native people? We don't like it when Canadians are unemployed. We're concerned when we're around 10% and more. We're concerned when there's 1 million people in this country that are unemployed. But what about when 90% of your people are unemployed? I don't think we have a solitary thing that we should be celebrating about unless we are going to do something different in the future. It's really time for some change. It's really time that the European people and their descendants and the rest that are here, that are now Canadians, seriously begin to address the basic relationship they have with this land and the people that were here first. We can do things differently in this country. We can be leaders for the world. We criticize Africa, Southern Africa, and the racism that is seen there. And yet we have no examples at home. The problem they're having in South Africa is descendants of European people trying to wrestle with how they are going to live with an indigenous population. In that case, the indigenous people are the majority. And so there's paranoia in that white race that's there. But what's your paranoia? We're the minority here. Why can we not deal here with the problems that we criticize South Africa about? Why can we not have a situation here where Native people have enough land and enough control over their lives that they can have some dignity? We have no reason to criticize anybody else. We have no examples to show the world. But it can be different. And it must be different. Or the next couple of decades will not be the French-English problem. That will not be your problem. You cannot continue to have a situation where people are lined up to get to the negotiating table. And maybe in 30 years, maybe in 40 years, they will begin to negotiate. You cannot continue to contain that situation. What we have now in the way land is being dealt with in this country, we have treaties that are hundreds of years old, that are supposedly protected by the highest law in this country, the Constitution. And we have not yet fulfilled the land requirement in those constitutional, legal documents. Can you think of any other people amongst us that we would have that kind of legal document and we would still, 100 years later, be talking about whether we should fulfill that? It only could happen. It only could happen to Native people. It certainly would never happen to the Anglos. And the time has come, and thank God to them that they have the power now. It would not anymore ever happen to the French. It was an insult to the First Nations when the premiers and the prime minister of this country could walk out of a room that they were locked into long after midnight, and they were going to tell the world that there were two founding people, that there were two distinct societies. My God Almighty, those men were the same men, the majority of them, for the 5 years previous, that people like myself had been meeting with. And yet they had the audacity or the ignorance to come out of there and not recognize that Canada, nowhere else in this world do the indigenous people from here call home. And if we are not distinct here, where in the hell are we distinct? I believe we can do something different. We want to do something different. We are sick and tired of coming to events like this and being your conscience. Absolutely sick and tired of it. We'd love nothing more than to be able to go around and dance and feel good about ourselves. But by God, we have too many real things to be concerned about.